Okay, can you guys see me? Yes, I can see myself. Well, a very warm welcome to you. This is HUL256 critical thinking um, in the M slot, day one. My name is Arudra Bura, and today all I thought I'd do is um, give you a little bit of a sense of what the course is about, who I am, uh, a sense of how it might progress, and take any questions from you. Um, but we'll start sort of substantive course material on Thursday's class. So as I've posted on Teams, the course material will be available on the course Piazza site, and I'll just share that right now. So you see it. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
You can, right? Okay, good. All right, I'm just going to let me just leave that on for the moment and just say a little bit about myself. So, my name, as I said, is Arudra. I've taught at IIT now almost 10 years, and my background actually was more in the maths and computer science when I switched to philosophy and also law after college. And I spent many years in the US, came back to India and started teaching um, uh, just a little under 10 years ago. So my areas of specialization are sometimes what's called moral and political philosophy on the one hand, and um, so I'm interested in questions about, let's say, the nature of freedom of speech would be an example of in political philosophy. A lot of my work these days is not so much in philosophy, but more on constitutional law and legal history. So I'm very interested in questions about um, debates around the making of the Indian Constitution, how to think about the way in which the British legal structure um, survived or did not survive into the post 1947 or the post 1950 legal structures. So yeah, now neither, well, at least this historical work is not that relevant to the course that um, we're going to be um, taking together in the next 3 months, though I will try on occasion to make links between some of that material and our course material. But our course is essentially a philosophy course. Um, the course is called critical thinking, but in a way, some people might think that that's an odd term, like thinking by itself, almost by definition, has to be critical in certain kinds of ways. That's at least one view uh, people have about the content of a course like this. Um, for our purposes, you might think that one can get into the course in two different kinds of ways. One is this the way of that is sometimes thought about as applied philosophy. And you think, look, philosophy has been concerned, philosophers, at least philosophers in the particular tradition that I'm part of, which I would say is you might call a Western philosophical tradition, or uh, the term that's sometimes used, I'll just type it in the chat box, is um, analytical philosophy. Um, Philosophers in this tradition, whom, if you think about the tradition, um, these might be some familiar names, like Plato, Aristotle, Kant, Locke, Hume, Descartes, Are these familiar names? Any of them come across? I see some nods.
Yes, sir. These are.
So
I've heard even of Confucius or something like that.
Okay, great. So Confucius is not really part of this tradition. Confucius would be part of the tradition of Chinese philosophy. But that's fine. My point, the reason, I'm so sorry, I haven't switched off my phone, which is very bad thing of me to do. So the point is, philosophers in this tradition have thought for a long time about questions about, what is knowledge? Um, how can I distinguish things I really know from things that I just happen to believe in because my parents have told me or my teachers have told me, and I have kind of agreed in some unreflective kind of way. What is it? What can I add? What is to be added to just having a belief in something that can make it something I really know? Um, the branch of philosophy that's concerned with that question is the technical term is epistemology. Nowadays you can think of, for instance, people talk about, you would have heard the term conspiracy theory. Oh. What's a conspiracy theory? What's wrong with it? What's so problematic about a conspiracy theory?
Majority of the times it tends to spread false information, and some people tend to believe it, and that further leads to confusion among people, and as in it doesn't always give a clear idea.
So it's not about false ideas or information. It's more about something which is different from what we are being trained to think of. For example, that we are living in a simulation. We as a human race is living in a simulation. That's a conspiracy theory. A conspiracy theory is that for example, that COVID-19, which we are going under through right now, is something is planned or will have many more levels to come. So these are things which are different from what we know as a human race, or what we have been taught beforehand.
So give me some examples of conspiracy theories. So Mohit has given one example. Have you come across this? Like, have you seen people actually make this claim that COVID is planned?
Yes, sir.
What about other theories, other things that you would call conspiracy theories?
So something like this
Okay, so
5G is very
let's have
injurious
some.
to health.
Okay, so we have let's have some hands up because it's hard for me to get everyone on the call otherwise. So let's see. We have Aryan, and then Unnati also was, somebody else was raising their hands. Let me see who.
Abhishek.
Okay, so I have Aryan, Unnati, and Abhishek.
You can call me Abhishek. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So Aryan first, then Unnati, then Abhishek. Okay, Aryan's hand is down. Unnati.
So can we consider this religious disparities that we have, like anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, as conspiracy theories? That this particular religion is something that is actually inciting other people, like they're bringing the harm upon the world. Like they just group all people into one group of where these people are going to harm others. Like
Okay.
Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, Nazism that was as promoted by Hitler.
So you might think that one of the aspects of Nazi ideology, and you look at Nazism actually in a bit of detail, you might think was the claim that there was an international conspiracy of Jews. I think it's in that sense that
Yes,
it's
sir. Yes,
a
sir.
conspiracy theory.
It's
Yeah.
like they're just categorizing all of them like they are the and like these people need to be eliminated because of this and this reason.
Okay, so that might be an example of a very famous conspiracy theory with kind of horrific consequences, right? Because perhaps a large, well, we don't know what majority of uh, Germans living in that period believed it, but certainly seem to have had quite horrific consequences. Um, okay, so that's another example. So we've got COVID, we've got Nazism. I see. Okay. Aryan or Amit, do you want to go ahead? I see you're back.
Yes, sir. Like I had started speaking the earlier time, but then I forgot I was muted.
Yeah,
So
tell me.
yeah,
So how do you would you say are you would you say you're listed as Aryan, Amit, Saple? So what should
yeah,
you call
Aryan.
you? Aryan. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think like if you're just asking for examples of conspiracy theories, like like for example, flat Earth theory, and then some people have the idea that man never really reached the moon. So these sort of ideas, which there is a lot of proof against, but then some people just believe that it's all sort of coordinated, and there's a lot. I mean, if I think for a definition of conspiracy theory, I think I'd go with something like, if you're believing something, if you're going to great lengths to believe something, like if you're implicating a lot of people, and it becomes very unrealistic, that at that point it becomes a conspiracy theory, like these two examples which I mentioned.
Okay. What's the conspiracy behind the flat Earth theory? What is the flat Earth theory?
So I think, matlab, like there is already a lot of proof that the Earth is round and spherical, right? So, but then there are still people who believe that the Earth is a flat, it's a flat disk, and they believe that for some reason the government and all the space agencies and everyone involved in science is just pushing this false information down their throat that it is round, and they believe that it is not round; it is still a flat disk.
So what's the conspiracy?
So, I mean, I think the conspiracy is that they believe that the government and all the organizations are are in a conspiracy to, trick the public.
Okay, because they have to kind of discount the evidence. They have to say, look, sure,
Yeah.
you think that this is evidence for the Earth being round, but because we don't think it's round, we have to explain your evidence away by saying that, look, this is a Sajid, this is some conspiracy.
Yeah.
Okay, so Abhishek, back to you, and then we have Purvi.
Yes, sir. For other examples, I'll drop my hand also first. So, yes, sir. So there are two other conspiracy theories that I've heard of in recent times. One is 5G networks, sir. People say that, if there's 5G network around us and we start getting health issues or something. And I even read some articles saying that this 5G is something that caused COVID. I don't know how. And another conspiracy theory I've heard of is that government is tracking every 2000 rupee note wherever it goes. There is some sort of chip on it or something. That's not practically true.
Okay.
Yet it causes some kind of, in my opinion, sir, I think a conspiracy theory is something that, like, it does not have a solid evidence, but yet some people tend to believe it and some people tend not to believe it. And it's a topic of debate actually. So
Okay. So I see a couple more hands. Purvi, did you want to come back in? I see your hand is down. Otherwise, we'll go with Sujit and then Srijit and Samir. So
Yes,
I'll
sir.
give,
My
yeah,
network got lost.
yeah,
Yes,
Purvi.
sir. So, one of the conspiracy theories I heard was that of an Area 51 and the aliens. Like in America, there's a place called Area 51, and basically, there were aliens who visited Earth, and they they the U.S. government basically confiscated the aliens and their high tech uh, weapons and stuff, and now the US government is using that so that it can demolish the whole world and so something like there's a conspiracy theory which says this.
Okay. Um, Sujit, should I call you Sujit or Nagendra or?
Yeah, yes, sir. Sujit, it is.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So regarding the conspiracy theory, I heard the one I come up with is the evolution, that some group of people consider that there was no evolution, and human directly came as they are. There was no like stages in what like that, all some monkey and then that evolution is not considered in that theory.
Okay. Good. Shrijit?
Yes, sir. So, like when the students were discussing especially the flat Earth theory, the flat Earth conspiracy, I think I realized that the claim that Earth is flat is not the conspiracy, but instead the flat earthers believe that a conspiracy had started by the government to tell the world either that man had landed on the moon or the earth is flat. I think that the claims that there have been conspiracies are not really conspiracies. Like all these flat earthers and all these other theorists think that the government has started a conspiracy and not that their own claim is a conspiracy. That's what I thought.
That's it. Nobody who the word conspiracy has a kind of negative connotation to it. It would not, one would usually not call oneself part of a conspiracy. One say, look, somebody else, one's opponents are part of a conspiracy. So that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go with two other people and then I'll move on. So Samir and then Unnati.
Okay, so the one I heard or like associated is that the deaths of political leaders, the one of Lal Bahadur Shastri, when he died in Uzbekistan on a dialogue with Pakistan. So there was rumors that Pakistan assassinated him, and he died of heart attack during that time. And the death of Subhash Chandra Bose by the crash landing of his flight. So both of them were very important to India during that time, and hence their death gave a setback to our progress during that time.
And the claim is, in this case, this is connected to the point Shrijit just made, that the conspiracy has, look, the claim is this event happened because of a conspiracy. A conspiracy is a bunch of people getting together, making a plan for something, right? Usually a bad plan. Unnati.
Sir, just expanding on what Samir said, there was I actually had a question regarding it. Like when I had seen a post on Instagram where it was like there had been a case when people believe that a large fraction of people believe that Nelson Mandela had actually died in prison in 1995 and not in 2013 and around that time. And it was somewhat related to like alternate reality or something. So can we say that this was also a conspiracy theory about people believing that Nelson Mandela had actually died in 1995 and not stayed alive till 2013?
I guess, and I suppose the term, and we'll look at this, I think, a little bit later on in the course. But yeah, you might think maybe that's a conspiracy. The people who believe this would think that the people who, this is what actually happened to Mandela, and it's just a conspiracy to make us believe that he was alive, and a lot of people colluded to get us to believe that. So just to step back a little bit, I'm going to go to the chat window. Feel free to um, uh, put in stuff in the chat if your audio is not working. Some of the terms that have come up are terms having to do with the notion of evidence, for instance, or proof, or truth of beliefs. So these are terms that are studied a lot by philosophers in this field called epistemology. And I'm just going to go back to the Piazza page. So philosophers have thought about, look, the status of knowledge claims. I claim that the earth is round, you claim that the earth is flat. Well, on what basis can we decide which of these claims is correct? What sorts of evidence? What does it mean to have evidence to support one claim rather than another? That's kind of part and parcel of this very theoretical work, theoretical questions, and we'll be seeing kind of an applied shadow of that. And one of my aims is to give you pointers if you wanted to go for each of these topics to go deeper into um, uh, the very theoretical, abstract material that you'd be able to do that yourselves. We can have some conversation about that in the tutorials as well. But like I said, I think most of our aim is going to be in the context of applications. We'll also talk a little bit about, especially in the beginning of the class, um, we'll look at a bunch of these tools for reasoning and argumentation. I'll come back to this. And then I'm not sure if this is the best way to frame that topic of the class, but I do think that what I'm hoping that you will get out of the course, which will become clearer to you as I go through the list of topics, is really something like a toolkit for critical thinking, which involves, on the one hand, some kind of motivational aspects, like why be a critical thinker? Why be, I don't know, skeptical or wanting to ask for evidence about things? Why should you want to sort of think for yourself as opposed to rely only on what the authorities say, that kind of thing. So one set of tools is kind of motivational. Another set of tools will be sort of skill based, in the sense that, to give you an example, advertisers often try and sell you things that often you don't need or may not be good for you. What's an example of that? What's an example of an advertisement that sells something that you think you shouldn't really fall for?
Coke.
Sorry?
Coke.
Coke. Why? What's the problem with Coke?
Because it's sugar water basically.
Okay, and what's wrong with selling you sugar water?
It's not healthy for our body.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
travel agencies selling us vacations so that we can apparently get some free time or rest for a while.
So what's problematic about that?
So is it very necessary to rest? Is it necessary?
But what's wrong with the advertisement?
So they are basically selling us a vacation. Like,
okay,
we don't even know that we need that vacation or not, or we need to go to that place or not. Like, for example, going to Goa is something very important for some people. Like it becomes like something which they want, because they want, but they do not know that they actually want that or not.
Okay. So maybe one thing that advertisements do is they kind of create a need in you, or they create a desire in you that maybe doesn't correspond to a need. We had the example of the travel agent. How does Coke sell itself? If it's sugar water, like why are we paying money for sugar water?
It actually sells itself based on the feeling, like they give that feeling of satisfaction after some work. So it actually markets its feeling in its advertisements more than actually talking about the drink.
Okay, Unnati, you want to come? And Srijit, you have your hand up, but is that from earlier? But go ahead, Unnati.
So they usually market the drink using the face of the popular celebrities and all. Like if your celebrity is using this, then the people feel an urge, even though they don't need to, but they feel an urge to just follow in the celebrity's footsteps because this XYZ celebrity uses it. So I also want to use it because it somehow brings me to not even if to the level, but closer to the level of that celebrity lifestyle. So they create a sort of, we can say, a false narrative where the people feel like if they do this same thing that the celebrity is doing on screen, they will actually be somewhat at a bit of a level. That gap between the level of the celebrity and that person might actually reduce because the
They're
celebrity uses
consuming
the
the
same
same
product
thing.
as me.
Same product.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Shambhav?
Yeah, building on what was said just before me, for example, Coke and McDonald's and fast food chains often they align themselves or advertise in sport events like the Olympics or like the FIFA World Cup. Now, people can and use of athletes now, particularly, it's a well-known fact that they aren't good for you or not very healthy.
but by using people who are considered to be like the pinnacle of human fitness to be advertising their products, they can create a false sense of security with respect to their product, that it is actually not that bad for you.
So suppose you were somebody who's working in the field of public health, and you want to kind of spread the message that people shouldn't be taken in by these advertisements. What would you say? What could you say to people? Say, don't buy Coke just because you see that a celebrity is drinking it. Is that what you say? What? Oh, maybe I'll put it in a simpler way. Suppose I buy Coke based on advertisement, and you say, look, don't do that. Why are you buying Coke? I say, look, it's for the reasons Unnati told me. Like, I feel a little closer to the celebrity who's advertised drinking Coke, and what's wrong with that? Can you talk me out of that? Yeah, Unnati.
So if I present to you something, like if I present to you the harms of the same thing, which are going to be, it's kind of like if we weigh the harms and the benefits that you see, and I come in with the harms that the drink might bring to you, like harms on your health, and it's basically ways that it's simply sugar water and it has acid which is going to affect you and it might cause cancer. And also if you weigh, it's about how we convince. If we convince the other person in a way that they see the harms being more effective rather than the benefits that they were earlier seeing, then that person may be convinced to not buy the drink. Like how it was with kurkure. People started convincing each other that if you burn kurkure, it actually leaves that black hole and it's plastic, and that's why you're basically eating plastic. So people, there was, yeah, sir, it did happen. That's
Yes,
like,
there was a conspiracy
I
theory
also
about
don't
that.
know this.
That kurkure is actually plastic
actually
covered
my
in
uncle was a
Yeah.
shopkeeper, so somebody came to him and said that don't sell kurkure because of so and so, and it was like it created a ruckus there.
Wow, and has kurkure, like, is it still sold as a result, or
It is sold.
It is still.
Sir, it is a
It
similar
is
case
still
like Maggie only, sir. Maggie also,
Yeah.
hang on,
you might have heard of that issue.
let's do this hand thing, because a lot of people end up rejecting. Wow, I feel like the thing to do now is for me to go and get some kurkure and try and put it on fire, and only my laptop is likely to burn as a result. Okay, so in fact, I'm going to just pause us and get back into the Piazza page. So, you're the first, roughly between weeks 1 to 5, we're going to look at some of the stuff, not necessarily the same examples. And I'm hoping that I'll have a guest lecture by somebody who's worked in advertising for many years, to talk a little bit about maybe techniques that advertisers use, how to think about, well, again, what kind of toolkit might you want to have to resist the effects of advertisements upon you in the cases where they should be resisted. There's a parallel with cases of political propaganda. So Unnati already brought up the example of the Nazis, and as I said, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the course. But one of the big questions that arose after the Second World War was, so how did this highly advanced nation, highly educated nation, bring itself to mobilize for the destruction of Jews in the 1930s and the 1940s? And one part of that answer is that the Nazis had a highly effective propaganda campaign. People have heard about this. People know the word propaganda. What are some examples of propaganda?
So propaganda does, like,
Unnati, hand first, just because other people jump in. Yeah, sorry.
the propaganda we can say that creating a putting up benefits that you want to show people, and like we are going to bring this, like if we come in terms of political propaganda and bring up the political parties in India, then usually their main stance is that it's not a development for all wala thing, but it's more of like we are going to, they're providing benefits to certain communities that are going to contribute the most to their vote bank, and they are providing specific benefits to them only. If we like see it from a very third person perspective, like to some religious communities, there are parties that provide relief to only some religious communities. Like I had been in this debate, it was about West Bengal, the policy that follows in West Bengal. Like people in West Bengal, they themselves feel that their CM is actually promoting the Western Bengal Muslims more than the actual people, and that had been the reason why there are always riots that happen after the election thing. So like propaganda is basically they're focusing on their vote banks, and it's not like the picture that they're painting, that we are concerned for the general public or we are concerned about this, is actually false. It in the end it's just a whole way to satisfy their own needs.
Okay, so we'll look a little bit more at maybe examples of political propaganda. It's an interesting thing. We live in a very polarized time, both in India and in the world right now. So it's a complicated thing to discuss actual politics in a class like this. So I would like to make some space for that. Um, I'm not entirely sure how to do that. That'll be certainly my attempt. One thing that sometimes I find useful in thinking about political polarization, which is in a way, at least recently, if you think of a course, if you look up a title like critical thinking courses, at least in a place like the US, you'll see that for many people in universities, the impetus to teach a course is to say, look, people have elected, Donald Trump, and no rational democratic population would have done so, and so we need to now kind of educate people, give them the tools to make sure that they don't elect somebody like that. Now, that's not the way I would approach a course like this, but just to say that there is that element to a teaching of this kind. But we'll come back. There's how to talk about politics in this course, how to maybe structure our agreements and disagreements. And we'll certainly see one aspect in the context of propaganda and advertising. Okay, so I see 3 hands, Arin, Tanish, and then Samir. And then I'll move on to the next topic. Yeah.
Yeah, sir. I was just going to extend on the topic of political propaganda.
Yeah.
I think it's more like what happened in 2014 in India. It was like the Bharatiya Janata Party brought out all the positive aspects that were done in Gujarat, and then they claimed that they had turned all of India into that of Gujarat. I think that was a propaganda.
So it's interesting, right? In one of the interesting theoretical questions is to ask, and why is propaganda anything different from just like telling people you want to, from advertising? And why shouldn't a political party or a political leader in a democracy advertise and say, look, you should vote for me because I'm going to do this? It's not immediately clear on his face, at least, what the problem is with that. But sure, that might be one example. Tanish and then Samir.
So another example could be like in the Second World War, people were told that the Germans were essentially bad people, and how they spread the hatred against the Germans so that people would go out and want to beat them in the war.
So you might think in any kind of wartime kind of scenario, you have to end up demonizing the enemy because you have to create a population that is okay with killing other people, right?
Yeah.
That requires propaganda, and it doesn't matter whether it's on the good side, the good guys or the bad guys. Ultimately, in order to create people willing to kill other people, you have to do a lot to their psychologies. Sure. Samir?
I guess like the propaganda, propaganda can be in different domains, and these can go hand in hand. For example, like religious propaganda and then political propaganda. Now, like in the case of conversions during earlier times, as they provided benefits to the lower margins of Hindu community. So like they could get a better benefit by converting to Christians or Muslim. Now, this can be beneficial to political parties, as we can see in Karnataka, the new anti-conversion bill. So, like the current BJP is in power. Now, the opposition can then focus on the Christian community or other communities so as to enhance their vote bank or mobilize them. Now, their propaganda will be to get their support and then attack the government in power.
Okay, just as by the way, you might equally well say it's the government's propaganda to to bolster their own support to attack these communities.
Like basically vice versa.
But sure, fair enough. So these are examples. So we'll look at some of this stuff. I'm going to go back now to Piazza. So we'll see like I said, almost the first half of the course is just going to be on tools that involve ways of assessing conspiracies, advertising, propaganda. Then we'll go into another section, which I've noted now is 2 weeks, but in the past has gone a little bit longer than that. And I'm calling it science and pseudoscience. Has anyone come across that term, pseudoscience? How many of you believe that vaccines are effective against COVID?
So off the record, on the record, like.
Well, it's being recorded.
So
I won't hold it against you. Well, I can't say, maybe somebody else in this call will. Yeah. Okay.
So lately, a lot of things have come up. Like I've been reading articles and articles or information about this, and many people are actually they're trying to convince us that vaccines are not as effective, or they are just there. They give you a sense of hope that you'll be better, that you are better now psychologically, that you are better now. So that is something I've been battling for past 2 or 3 months, I guess. But before that, I used to think yes, vaccines are very important. I was one of the first people who just went in as soon as they started up for 18 plus people. So yeah, that is something.
How many people believe that? What was that? Wasn't there a moment when the Prime Minister said you have to thali bajao for the?
Yes, that was there too.
How many people think that that works as a way of actually going against the vaccine?
So they have their own proof or argument that vibrations kill the virus. The vibrations of thalis kill the virus. So
And you guys agree?
So like,
So
are you
so
saying
we did
that?
Hang on. Now there are many people in, so just put your hands up so I can.
So could you please repeat the question for once?
Oh, I was asking. I had two questions actually, and maybe you can frame it. I can frame it to you as a comparative question. If you think about ways of protecting yourself from COVID or responding to the pandemic, one is like a program of mass vaccination, and another is a program of mass bajawing of a thali at whatever 7 o'clock at night, let's say. Which do you think is more effective or better to go with? I see Sujit's hand up. Sujit, Shashank.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, Sujit, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I think the vaccines are more effective because if the sound waves can kill the viruses, then we have better instruments which can throw a better high frequency sound waves that can easily kill the viruses. So why do we need to make those sound waves out of the thali bajao?
Okay.
So I think I think COVID vaccines are more effective.
Okay, Shashank.
Yeah, so in that thali thing, you need to have that certain frequency at that time to kill the viruses. So if you go with the vaccine, you are just supposed to take that particular shot at that time. But if you are, going with the thali and asking people to beat that particular whatever you call it, and then I mean, think someone might not beat it properly, or there are many circumstances which might not allow that frequency to beat the virus. So I think vaccine seems a better option.
Okay, Samir.
So vaccine is certainly like better than thali because I guess the thali thing was only to show appreciation for the healthcare workers, not to kill the virus. Like, am I
But some
right
people
in?
said that, this is Unnati's point. I thought many people believed that it would also kill the virus because of the vibrations. No,
Like
wasn't that a popular belief?
I did see that on Twitter, but like Twitter or on WhatsApp forwards, but not a valid news article. So I
Okay.
don't think that would be feasible.
Okay, fair enough. So one of the things um, we will look at in this section of the course, it's not a term that anyway, surprisingly that came out just now, but some people might say, look, the proof that vaccination works, science tells us that vaccination works, but there's no scientific reason to think that sound vibrations will kill the virus. Somebody might say that, right? Somebody might say that, look, that's why we should go with vaccination rather than vibrations. It turns out it's quite an interesting philosophical question, and it's studied in this whole field of philosophy called the philosophy of science, which is invested in understanding this question of, well, what does it mean for a claim to be scientific versus, let's say, for a claim to be superstitious? So we look at a debate, and in India, the debate has sometimes played out as science versus superstition. Not very good. So that's what we look at in that part of the course. Hang on. Yeah, Unnati and then Mohit.
Sir, in this pseudoscience thing, can we take into consideration that infamous Minister of Rajasthan, who just comes in and puts up any claims that these things are related to science, like merging religion and some scientific belief? I don't remember his claims exactly. There was one that something related to cow, and I don't even remember the name. He is the minister of Rajasthan, and it actually makes headlines because of how just total gibberish those claims are. So can we include those in pseudoscience as
But
well?
I mean, Unnati will have to know what those claims are, no? Before one can do that.
I can
So,
actually look it up on the internet and just send it here.
Sure. Mohit.
So anything which is science or pseudoscience is basically proven by falsification. From what I've learned, that if we can falsify something, then we can tell that it is not there, and then the contrary is true. For example, there is one sun. We know that we have falsified the possibilities of other suns in our solar system. So yeah, there is one sun that is the contrary. That is the contrary to many suns. So that is something that is proven and that is scientific. And similarly, on what Unnati was just saying, if I'm not correct, if I'm not wrong, the claim was something related to some mythological some Ramayana or Mahabharata, and telling that how it was done then and it can be done now as well. Something like that it was.
So one of the places this comes up, so we will actually look at this concept of falsification in some detail. But yeah, in India, one of the places this comes up in is these discussions about ancient Indian science. Is ancient Indian science really science? I don't know how many of you guys have seen this. There's a current controversy on this IIT Kanpur calendar. Anyone's come up? Seen this IIT Kanpur calendar? No? Okay,
Sir,
well, look it up. Oh, there's Unnati is the cow is the only animal that takes in oxygen and releases oxygen. We had one example from Sujit in the chat, which was bathing in cow dung as a way to avoid COVID, I'm guessing. So, was that the idea? That the
You're talking about this IIT Kharagpur, that spiritual calendar which has come out 2 days.
Oh, I thought it was Kanpur. Are you sure it's Kharagpur?
I'll just check it out.
Yes, sir, it was Kharagpur. It was Kharagpur. Anyway, so we may even look at that calendar as an example of trying to think through this science versus pseudoscience question. I'm going to, just in the interest of time, move on to. So again, why this is conversation is going all over the place, but this is all just to illustrate the kinds of questions we will look at in the course. So we've now gone to from weeks 1 to week 7, so a little over halfway. Then I want to spend some time on this term, which I don't know if it's a familiar term to any of you. Heuristics and has anyone come across that term?
Sir, can you please name it? For some reason, I'm not able to see in the chat.
Oh, okay. It's called heuristics and biases.
Yeah, so I have
heuristics.
Okay, hang on. Now, again, people have to raise their hands because
but
a whole bunch of
don't
people.
know, like don't remember what that was about.
Okay, you heard the term, but you don't remember it.
Yes.
Anyone who's heard the term and remembers it? Tanish.
So it's jumping to conclusions. It's directly jumping to conclusion without properly having a regional bias and without properly having a logical explanation to it, so as to avoid the cognitive load involved in that. I think so.
And what's an example of that?
So if I ask you, what are the if I ask you, let's say, the number of words that start with the letter K and the number of words that have K letter in the middle of it, which are more. So intuitively, we would say that the former one should be more, right? Because it decreases the cognitive load, and in the sense that we would easily come across words which have K in them in the starting, but not in the middle. So I think it could be an example of heuristics.
Okay, good. That's a complicated case, but we'll talk about it in some more detail. Shashank?
Yes, sir. So I have come across a word called heuristic and evaluation. So I was in Jyotis's class, so he, helped us to understand the concept of heuristic in a way that it's more something you do on your own by learning something on your own in a practical way. Instead of you telling me, this should be done this way, you go ahead, you try it on your and you develop your philosophy. How should be that thing done? So yeah, that is my understanding.
So heuristics is, a heuristic is essentially a shortcut. It's a way that your mind works to, as Tanish said, reduce your cognitive load. Often heuristics are very useful and important. We couldn't do without them, but sometimes they go quite wrong, especially when reasoning about statistics or reasoning about probabilities. To give you one kind of example, for instance, I don't know how many of you have parents who are kind of anxious about traveling by air. Actually, forget about that. Just think about people who are anxious about traveling, about COVID. I know I often work on this thing that, if I have a friend or a relative who's got COVID, who's been very sick, or somebody's passed away, like I'm much more scared about COVID than I was if there wasn't somebody close to me who had it. And you might think, look, that's kind of irrational, right? Like, just because I happen to know this person, and the statistics on COVID are already available. People know how to avoid them. What are the statistics on their, the likely outcomes? Why should it matter so much in how I change my life that, my brother's got COVID, or, this friend, I was just reading today, father of a friend of mine passed away from COVID, and I read that and I think, okay, I have to be really, really careful now. But you might wonder this kind of mental shortcut may not actually be that helpful in navigating the statistical world. Anyway, I'm not saying this very clearly, but it's work that's most famously associated with a psychologist by the name of Daniel Kahneman. Have people come across that name?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he won the Nobel. Shamba, you want to say something about Kahneman?
Nothing particular, but he has a really nice book, Thinking Fast and Slow. I really enjoy reading it, and yeah, it was a good book.
So Shambhav has this reference, which we'll look at a little bit from this book. And I have some colleagues in our department who work on this material, so I might ask one of them to give a guest lecture. So this is really from the field of cognitive psychology, understanding how our minds work, and we'll do some looking at cognitive psychology to help us as critical thinkers. This become thinking better, particularly in the context of reasoning about statistics. So that's that portion of the course.
So I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, there was somebody who had a hand up. Yeah, go ahead.
So how different is heuristics from a prejudice? How are they different, or are they totally different things? Am I confusing myself with it? Because from what I'm hearing for the past 5 minutes, I think it's somewhat like prejudice. Like we don't have to think much about it, but we have it in our mind. It's actually how our mind conceive things on the first look, or the first on the face value itself.
So it's a very good question. I don't think you're confusing yourself. I think the short answer is we can't do without heuristics, but sometimes we should just totally go with our heuristics, but we should be aware of the ways in which heuristics can lead us astray. And so the piece of information then is just, look, in this kind of circumstance, maybe I shouldn't rely on my heuristic. I should rely on something else, some other kinds of information I might have. It's one part of this issues of thinking about how our minds work. In many ways, our minds are, extremely well designed instruments, but yeah, in some ways sometimes they can lead us astray in very predictable kinds of ways, and it's useful to know what those are as a way of avoiding mistakes. So if you've come across the work of Daniel Kahneman or come across this book, Thinking Fast and Slow, this material will be familiar to you. And the last bit of the course, I've called it Reasoning with Numbers and Data. I've put this in the syllabus. This is the third time I've taught this course, critical thinking, and I've never been able to actually get to talk about reasoning with data, just because the other stuff has been so much fun, and when one's just ended up spending more time there and not having enough time to work on this. But I really would like to get us to be a little bit more critical, thoughtful when we come across claims involving data in the sphere of public policy, for instance. For instance, how to think about statistics on COVID death. There are issues of definition, there are issues of data collection, there are issues of data integrity. So that's one set of questions that's quite interesting. One thing I've worked on in the past is thinking about, I used to teach a course on the criminal law, on criminal justice, and we looked at the National Crime Records Bureau, called the NCRB. It collects data on different kinds of crimes across the country, murder, rape, theft, and all. And sometimes the data looks a little bit more solid than it actually is. And I want to give you some sense of when you see a claim in a newspaper, I don't know, such and such state has is a much more unsafe place for women because the number of rape FIRs filed has increased in the last 5 years. You'll see that kind of thing. You know, such and such state is the most unsafe or the most unsafe city for women. Well, on what basis do you make that kind of claim? Or you think of ranking, you know, such and such college is the #1 ranked college for engineering in India or in the world. How do you make sense of these numerical sorts of claims? So that's the plan. It may be too ambitious a plan, in which case we'll we may do a bit of a course correction after a few weeks, see how fast or slow the class is moving. I'm very happy to, I mean, for me, all of this stuff is fun and stuff that I don't know that much about. So as I'm teaching you, I don't see myself teaching you as somebody who has a lot of expertise in this, putting it out there. It's more like this is cool stuff that I find exciting, and class is a good excuse to learn about it and learn from you guys. So that's how I at least approach it.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, Shashank, go ahead.
So I'm curious to know what exactly you used to teach the people in law classes, though the class that you are discussing the crimes and all.
Let's come back to that at the end. I'm just worried that we're
yeah, sure.
We're going to be out of time very soon, but I'm happy to talk about that. Okay, so that's like the first. What we've just done in the last hour actually is just talk about the course content. And I've already sent you this Piazza link where I'll populate the readings. I've already sent the readings for week 1. So these 2 short pieces, which I would like you to read and think about on Thursday. Let me turn now to the evaluation scheme. Can you see that?
Yes, sir. It's visible.
Okay. So these 2 paras are important. So just my own, increasingly my own view that this whole business of assigning grades and courses is really sort of regressive and unfortunate, and I think is just like a, for me, unfortunately, like a practical necessity. I'd get thrown out of IIT if I didn't do some, if I didn't give you exams and didn't grade you on them. So I will, but hopefully in ways that will be, you will get something out of and hopefully have fun with. We'll talk a little bit, actually. I think in the first tutorial, I'd like to discuss a couple of these articles I've linked with, which I'd encourage you to read, whereby a man I admire a lot, called Alfie Kohn. He's an educationist. So I don't think there's much point in grading, though I think it can be fun to, I think there are different ways of making this challenging course, and giving you assignments might be one of them. Pass marks 30%, auditors and non-auditors, no formal attendance requirements. For me, actually, I would urge you, if it's possible, to get out of thinking of this in a teacher-student kind of mode. So I think of this as, there are a bunch of interesting questions, at least questions that I find interesting. I think some of you might find interesting. Let's come into this space, whether it's an online space or hopefully at some point an offline space, to think about them really from a position of equality, and come out with your own conclusions about this material. So again, attendance, I feel like, is this thing of, it's too much of the danda. I don't like that mode anyway. The lectures are going to be recorded. I do think it's nice. I feel like it creates a nice community when people show up and we get to know each other a little bit over the course of the semester, and then some of this material builds up um, on each other. So in week 9 we might go back and think about something we talked about in week 2 or 3. So it's useful to have the people in the conversation be there throughout. But I certainly am not going to monitor it. And you're welcome to look up the lectures and attend when you want. I would say it's probably in some ways maybe hard to do well without regular attendance, but some people have, and more power to them. There's no attendance requirement in tutorial. So I've found at least the tutorial portion of the course, for me at least, has been a lot of fun. And I don't know if you have friends who have taken this class before, but that is the sense I had with them also, that they really enjoy the tutorial space. We will cover a lot of new material so in addition to what's assigned for the lectures, there will be material assigned for tutorials. Soon enough, I'll ask people to make presentations in the tutorials themselves. Not to make presentations, but to run the tutorial. I'll run the first couple of weeks, and then you can run the rest. So no attendance requirements, no recording though, because I feel like recording imposes a certain kind of formality, which I'd prefer not to have. Okay. The grading components, there are 4 in all. They're these short answer questions of 5 marks each. That's like a reading comprehension question almost. So every 3 weeks, I'll give you 2 of these short answer questions. So that's going to be 10 marks every 3 weeks. You'll have 4. You'll get this 4 times, and I'll pick the top 3. So that's 30 marks. Just to give you a flavor of what that looks like, let me get you to. So this is the Moodle for last semester. So here's like a short answer question from. Well, maybe it's hard to. You won't know what this means because you've not done the reading. But it's this is the kind of thing that you'll be asked to do in your short answer questions. Then there's a minor. Rather than, it's hard to characterize in the abstract what the minor is, but what I'll do is I'll give you the example. I'll give you as an example what the minor question was last time I taught the course. Take a moment to look at it. And this is longer than needs to be, but essentially your assignment was you teach critical thinking in a German college during the Nazi rise to power. You see all this Nazi propaganda around you. So in that course, at least, we looked at a lot of examples and descriptions of Nazi propaganda, and the question that you were asked to think about it is, okay, look, if you're a teacher and you're looking at the same materials that I've been looking at you, what are you going to use? What critical thinking skills, concepts, and arguments would you wish your students to have in order to resist such propaganda? Do you think that you will succeed? So that's an example of what that is the minor for last semester. This semester it could be something different. Partly depends upon how what exactly you read, how the class is working out. Maybe I'll just ask the same question this time as well. There's a major. Again, it's easier to show you what it was rather than describe it. So let me do that. Here is where is the major? This was the major which had to do with the distinction between science and pseudoscience. And essentially, I gave you guys, I gave the class some classic readings on science versus pseudoscience, and then I asked them to apply it to an article by a man called Narendra Dabholkar. Anyone come across that name? Anyone heard of Narendra Dabholkar? Yeah, Sujit.
Yes, sir. I have heard about because the his death was calling a lot of debates at that time.
So who is he?
Yeah, he's a activist who, I mean, who works for the science. That he wants to give some logical answers to the question rather than those accepted religious and have no proper logic behind the things that they claim.
That's it. So he described himself as an anti-superstition activist.
Yeah.
And he was assassinated, I think, in 2015, along with some others.
Yeah.
I don't know if these names are familiar. M.M. Kalburgi, Govind Pansare, Gauri Lankesh.
Yeah.
Some of these names may be familiar to you. They're the topic of a movie by Anand Patwardhan called Vivek. And we may see a little bit of Vivek and read some of. So Dr. Dhavolkar was he was an anti-superstition activist in Maharashtra. Anyway, all of this is to show this is the kind of example of the question that you had for your major. And then there's also something called a writing reflection, which is 20 marks. And can you see it here? And it's basically, as the term suggests, a way for you to think about what you got out of the course, what has been, has anything been significantly changed your mind, not changed your mind, why, and a bunch of readings that we assigned last time, and I think I'm going to assign this time as well, had to do with this notion of, and you'll see that on Thursday, of the importance of thinking for yourself. And one of the questions I asked you is, well, what do you think of that notion? Why think for oneself? Why have these other writers thought? So that's the question that you'll have. Okay, so let's go back to evaluation components. I'll go back to the course description. Anyway, that's about it for me. So I've told you a little bit about myself. I've told you something about the topics, the kinds of topics we'll cover in the course. Again, we may not get to all of the ones I mentioned, but hopefully to a fair bit of them. As I said, all the material will be up on Piazza, and we'll take classes on Teams and tutorials on Teams. We'll start tutorials next week. We'll try and do the scheduling of the tutorials by this weekend. And now I leave it open for any questions people have.
The same question you can answer anytime you want, sir. Thank you.
The criminal law question. Okay, I'm going to leave it at the end of the classes in case there are other
Sure.
other course related questions.
Sir, I have a question about science and pseudoscience.
Like,
how do we say that a certain fact is scientific or pseudoscientific? So, the birth of Jesus Christ was previously believed as a pseudoscience, but now there are research papers which are being found, and they're describing that even a female can give birth to without having sex. There are research papers, and it has been found true. So now people are like, it is not found in humans, but it has been found in like birds and condors, like in California. So now they are saying that it is possible even in human. We don't really know whether all the people have been grown only because of sex, or not, or is it possible that few of them are grown even without sex?
It's a good question. So that's exactly the kind of thing. I can't give you a, many bright people have spent a large chunk of their lives working on this kind of question, but I'll give you, hopefully you'll get a jhalak into how to think about that question, but it's a good question to ask. One of the things you're pointing out is that beliefs that are seen as unscientific at one point might end up seen as having scientific basis at another point, and vice versa, right? Beliefs that people have regarded as scientific at one point in time, 50 or 100 years later, might seem as completely unscientific. One of my favorite examples is I was looking at, my grandfather had an encyclopedia from the 1940s or the 1930s, and I remember reading it when I was a kid, and it said something like, this new fad for exercise. Exercise is really bad. People should only exercise, very little, and certainly not if you're quite young. It's all about how the dangers of exercise. Whereas today now, every other article you read is about how important exercise is for you. So that's a kind of, the scientific consensus on things flips more than once, right? You see it in, I know, dietary practices. Is cholesterol good for you? Is cholesterol bad for you? How to make sense of this question about what science is when when scientists themselves can change their mind quite a bit. It's a central question for us. Anything else? Any questions about
Yes,
the big picture, the course grading, components,
So,
that sort of thing? Yeah.
will there be some specific philosophers we'll be studying or reading from?
Yes and no, in the sense that we will, um, we'll look at something by Immanuel Kant, and we'll look at a philosopher called um, W.J. Clifford. There's a philosopher of science called Karl Popper. So there's some particular, there will be philosophers we'll read, but my aim is not, in this course at least, to introduce you to the work of any particular philosopher in any kind of depth, more to introduce you to concepts, not through the philosophers themselves, but through through the concepts themselves. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any other questions about course logistics? Sanskar asked about tutorial timings. What I'm going to do, Sanskar, is send out an email, like a poll sometime later in the week. I'd like to have maybe 3, depending on how many people show up, maybe 3 tutorial slots in all, and let people show up to whatever tutorials they are able to. But because it's the M slot, I mean, there's no assigned tutorial timing. We can just figure out, based on what people's courses are. That makes sense?
Sir, we can have on Wednesday, I guess, on Wednesday between 1 to 3, there is no, people will not have so many classes. Like most people will not have classes.
Okay, so I'll keep that in mind, that maybe we can do 2 sessions. Wednesday 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. It's nice. I mean, there are a lot of people enrolled for class, but I'm not sure how many people are going to show up for tutorials. I think more than about 15 people in a tutorial is probably too much. And it's just harder to have a community feel to it. So we'll start. We'll start with 3 tutorial slots and see how that goes. But thanks, Ratnesh. That's useful to know about these thoughts. Anything else? Anyone else?
So the short answer questions you've mentioned, so they would be like quiz type, or like we will be given like a few days to submit it?
Everything is going to be take home. So you'll be given time to think about it. You're welcome to talk about it to your friends. Just let me know who you've discussed it with. This is part of my general skepticism of grading. I'm skeptical about the institution of an exam and that kind of thing. But my only strong rule is that your written work has to be your own. And so if I find people copy pasting either from each other or from the web, that's a no-no, and that gets you like a 0. But I think one learns in the real world, one learns by talking and looking up stuff and discussing with people. And it seems reasonable to do that in class as well. So that's my plan. Okay. I mean, I think these things are like a quiz. A lot of that seems very artificial. Like the aim is that you guys, my aim for you is that you come out of the class having learned something and having thought about something, hopefully that's interesting and got you to maybe question some of your beliefs. So whatever I do in the grading kind of space or the assessment space will be, towards that end.
Okay, sir.
Anything else? Okay. Well, I guess there's a couple of more minutes because we started a few minutes late, but just to answer Shashank's question, since he asked me what I used to teach in the philosophy of criminal law, Shashank, actually, if you go to my website, which I haven't updated like in almost a year, you'll find some syllabi to the earlier courses I used to teach and the readings for this course also. But I was interested in questions about what justifies punishment, should we abolish the death penalty, how to think about rape and sexual violence. Those are some of the questions that we looked at.
So you used to teach students to how to go about these issues, right?
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
I used to do is I would always start the class with this questionnaire that the National Law Commission sent out on the death penalty, and whether getting the views of citizens whether to keep it or abolish it. And then at the end of the course, I'd ask the students to fill it out again, and then compare their answers with their initial answers.
Oh.
And the writing reflection was this thing that I call the writing reflection now. Kind of came from that because I'd ask them to think about how their answer may have changed based on what they read in the course and that kind of thing.
So objective was to improve their judgment and thought process to judge a particular situation. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
And to give some domain knowledge. I think it's not just a question about skills, but you also have to learn something about how does the criminal system in India work? That's got to
Got it. And that you did this for IIT Delhi student, or you were in some other institute, or
no, IIT Delhi. I must have taught this. I started teaching that course just around the time of that 2012 Nirbhaya incident. It was just in fact when I joined IIT, and there was a lot of conversation about should we have the death penalty for rape, and so I wanted to give people like a set of perspectives and tools to answer that question.
Are you still teaching that course, or you have stopped teaching?
No, I've stopped it. The last time I taught it was a year. Yeah, I've not taught it for the last 24 months. I taught it the semester before that.
I mean, this will be a very valuable course for students. So is there any possibility you might start this again? Because I personally would be very interested to, go and understand these things at deeper level. So wanted to know that.
Not immediately. I kind of got bored of it myself. So I thought, let me try and teach something new. That'll be new for me also, and then therefore also maybe new for students.
Okay.
But I probably will teach something. This is my bread and butter when teaching how to think philosophically about some contemporary kind of issue. So yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, if there's nobody else, then thanks for sticking around. I'll see some of you on Thursday, I hope. Don't send me messages on Teams. I don't respond to messages on Teams. Just send me an email if you need any help. We have 2 TAs. I think Amjad is here. I don't think Praveen is here. So we'll introduce them on in the next meeting. And well, I should have said at the start, Happy New Year, and hopefully we'll see you sometime soon in person and not just online. Yeah. So have a good week.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, do you think that we can have classes offline also?
I hope so. Let's fingers crossed. Let's see.
Yes, sir.
But for now, I guess we're stuck with where we are.
Yes, sir. If it's becoming offline, then it will be better.
Yeah, it'd be great to have it offline. So yeah, so again, fingers crossed. Okay, see you guys. I'm going to stop recording. Amjad, I think what we'll do is, how do I stop recording?